Hi, and welcome to Thursday night of ATX Television Festival Season 10. Typically, we'd be kicking off the festival on a Thursday night, but we're officially a week into this shindig, and let me tell you, nothing keeps the adrenaline pumping like a good scare. Speaking for myself, horror TV has been extremely cathartic in processing these last 15 months, and horror anthologies in particular are better and more creative than ever. Shudder was one of the first places I went to start my venture into the genre, and I promise whether you're a bona fide horror badass or a more of a newbie like me, their library is extremely worth your time. In fact, if you have a favorite show or film on Shudder that you want to recommend, I'd like you to drop that into the chat right now so that we can get working on our to-watch list. Both Shudder and AMC Networks have been incredible to work with over this last year, and when we first started discussing this topic, we knew they were the perfect partner for this conversation. We are thrilled to have these brilliant creatives here tonight to talk to us live about their incredible work in the genre, and to have horror fanatic Damian Holbrook from TV Guide magazine and TV Insider here to moderate. As a friendly reminder, we will be opening up the last few minutes to audience questions. So if you do have a question for these panelists, tonight is your chance. Drop those in the Q&A box right above the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Damian to bring out our special guests and get this conversation started.
Hey there, thank you. Hey, Jennifer, thanks so much. Hey, ATX, thanks for coming to the live show. This is so exciting. So I'm Damian Holbrook from TV Guide magazine and TV Insider, and thank you for joining us this evening for a panel presented by Shudder, AMC Networks premium streamer for horror programming. I am so excited to dig into this conversation, which will explore horror anthologies primarily and the evolution of the storytelling format within an increasingly popular genre. Joining us for this discussion are producers, writers, and directors of 4 upcoming anthology series and films on Shudder. First, we have showrunner, writer, executive producer, and director on CREEPSHOW, which will return for its 3rd season this fall, Mr. Greg Nicotero. There he is. So from the just announced 4th installment of the VHS horror anthology franchise, so it's VHS 94, that is writer-director Chloe Okuno.
Hello.
Hello. Husband and wife writing team, Tananarive and Stephen Barnes, who are writers on Horror Noir, which debuts this fall and is inspired by the incredible documentary Horror Noir, which was on Shudder, or is on Shudder. And from Slasher, Flesh and Blood, debuting August 12th, director Adam MacDonald. All right, hello. Thank you guys so much for joining us. It really is a great time for anthologies. Like, these are really popping. They're having their moment. And it's something, there's something about horror anthologies, especially, that really lend themselves to that concept of like kids sitting around the campfire telling stories, or people just trying to scare each other. Were any of you inspired by a specific film or story or collection of stories when you were younger that got you into this stuff?
All of them.
Twilight Zone, Outer Limits.
All of them.
Yeah. Alfred Hitchcock Presents, man. Strange tales of science fiction, on and on and on.
Right.
For me, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, actually, if I'm being honest, it was probably CREEPSHOW.
The movie, though, not the TV show.
Well, both. But yes, initially, back when I was in college, I think my friend and I were particularly obsessed with CREEPSHOW. So.
Yeah. And Adam?
I kid you not, CREEPSHOW 2, the movie.
Oh.
Wow. And I saw that before CREEPSHOW 1, and I was so young, and I was like one of those that almost broke the VHS tape. I watched it so many times. But yeah,
I do feel like there's an entire generation that was their first introduction. It was either Stephen King's Night Shift, the book, or CREEPSHOW.
Well, it's funny because even with CREEPSHOW, CREEPSHOW 2, which I worked on, I did the effects on CREEPSHOW 2. So many people talk about that movie. I mean, when it came out, it didn't have the same impact as the original CREEPSHOW. But it's so interesting because I think I'm a little older than everybody else, so I was the kid going to the theater and seeing everything. But it's unique hearing people talk about having the opportunity to have a movie on VHS or beta and watch it over and over and over again. Because I think that had a massive impact on young horror viewers. Anthology shows, of course, but you know, like when you got to the 80s, there was so many new movies out every week that it was almost like the movie theater became its own horror anthology screening room, because every weekend there was one or two new movies. So it felt like you were getting something new all the time. And I really think that plays into what we're all talking about.
And there was kind of an explosion at that time as well of anthologies, horror anthologies, because first there was Creepshow, then they did the Twilight Zone movie, and then you got like Tales from the Hood, and then you got like all of those, you know, those collections where people got to kind of pick and choose your adventure, like which horror movie did you want to see in that anthology. And so that's one thing that I want to know from all of you. Like, everyone has their favorite kind of trope, like their favorite kind of thing. Like, some of us love like a slasher movie. Like, If You Give Me a Babysitter, I'm there. Some people love cosmic horror. Some people love vampires. Maybe some people like zombies.
Maybe.
Maybe people redefine zombies and make them like the biggest thing in the world. Do any of you have like a favorite genre that you just like you'd love to work in?
Well, he can attest to this. I can watch every movie about moving to the old house in the small town with the bumps and the noises, and maybe a demon if I'm lucky. I love that. I never get enough of it.
I really love stories of people dealing, you know, moral stories where if people stick to their values, if they show courage, if they stand together, they can survive. You know, okay. I have a dislike of films where people can struggle, you know, to the very greatest of their capacity and still get ground into dust. I can see that on the street corner.
Those can be fun.
I don't need to see that on the screen. I'm not going to pay money to see that.
Anyone else? Chloe?
Oh man, I mean, historically, I think I really have always loved making serial killer movies, or, you know, especially movies where it's a killer who you can interact with and have a conversation with, and there's something sort of like artificially charming about them that draws you in. Mm-hmm. I've always found that very appealing, because it's sort of like the horror of the sort of psychopath that goes undercover, which I feel like is maybe particularly like scary to women, because I feel like we encounter that in various forms all the time.
And the internet has invented new ways for you to encounter that.
Yes, so many ways now. But yeah, I also, God, I would love to do a vampire movie. That would be great.
Cool.
Adam, what about you?
I always love going into a film. I love a slow burn. I mean, both my films I love a good slow burn and the unknown. I love not knowing what's behind the door. Like this new movie that came out, The Vigil, kind of does. That's like a slow unraveling of what this thing is. I don't know what it is. I love when a movie does that. But also my favorite, and this is not because Greg's on the thing, it's absolutely zombies. That's number one. Okay, where do you fall on the zombie scale? Are you more about like the lumbering zombies who want to eat brains, or the running zombies? I'm agnostic. I'm agnostic. I love them all. I'm telling you, I love them all. Okay, but the first zombie movie I ever saw was Dawn of the Dead. That was the first one, and I was like, done. I was so young. I was like 10. I was like, that's it.
That'll do it for you. Yeah,
that's it.
And Greg, have you had enough zombies?
You know, I'll tell you, right when I think I've done the 10,000th zombie makeup or whatever, I find a new twist on it. Right. You know, there was a show on Netflix called Kingdom, which was like set in feudal China, and it was a zombie series, and they did 2 seasons, and they changed the rules. And usually I'm, you know, a lot of people know, like, I'm kind of a stickler for the rules, but I loved it. I loved that the rules were a little bit different. So, you know, I love Train to Busan. I mean, I still love my zombie stuff. You know, look, Dawn of the Dead is the movie for me, and will always be the movie for me. And George is the guy who, you know, he used to say to me that, you know, for a long time, he was the only kid in the sandbox. And he was okay being the only kid in the sandbox.
So
and then
sad.
all of a sudden, he's making this cool zombie castle, and there's zombie toys, and there's zombie stuff. And then he looks over, and there's somebody over there. And he looks over, and there's somebody over there. And you know, I always say that the zombie genre was really infused by like the first person shooter games like House of the Dead and Resident Evil.
Right.
I really believe that that's what sort of reinvigorated the zombie genre. And then of course, Resident Evil and 38 days later. But look, you know, I mean, I got to say, like with Tananarive, the only movies that really scare me, and the thing, ghost stories scare me because they get under my skin. Like
Unknown.
Like I get like nothing really scares me. Like serial killers or spiders, giant spider, whatever. But you know, I watched Hereditary, which I absolutely adored, and it's a really unique movie because you either love or you hate it. But I had tingling the whole like. And Adam, talk about like a slow burn. I had no idea where that movie was going. So I'm a fan for those types of movie where I don't know wherever it lets me off, whatever step it lets me off at the end of the journey. If I don't see it coming, I have a good time.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so anthologies are such a kind of a unique beast in that they do give you kind of like that sampler platter. You can start a movie and have all of our favorite styles. What do you guys think is the key to making them all kind of work together?
Well, you know, I'll jump in real quick because I think what CREEPSHOW did, because, you know, one of the other anthology movies that we didn't really talk much about Amicus or Hammer, because Asylum, Tales from the Crypt, The House That Dripped Blood, all of those movies that were like late 60s, early 70s, really got it going for me. But, you know, I think CREEPSHOW was really the one horror movie that each segment had a different theme. And you know, whereas a lot of other horror anthologies, they have a theme and each one of them is kind of, it sticks to that theme. But with CREEPSHOW, I remember watching the Jordy Verrill segment and going, why Stephen King's got this green stuff growing all over him? Some of them were outrageous, some of them were scary, some of them were kind of a little strange. And I realized that that's what made CREEPSHOW different than most of the other anthologies, was the fact that every experience from each episode was different. Right. It wasn't like, you were gonna watch a movie where there was a through story or an overarching theme. And I think that was something that Steve and George did really well in the original CREEPSHOW.
And that's actually the opposite of what Chloe, you're working on in the VHS franchise. Like, they do segments, but there is an overarching theme. So let's talk about what 94 is.
Well, VHS 94, as the title suggests, we're kind of going back to 1994 to actual VHS tapes. And the premise of the movie is that a SWAT team goes in to investigate a video that they have gotten their hands of that shows a girl potentially being murdered. So they go in to investigate the source of where this video came from and come across a cult who have many videotapes, which is sort of our lead in to the various VHS segments. And it's funny, I mean, you know, I definitely think in VHS 94, you know, there is sort of, I mean, I think there's like a feeling to it that sort of like ties everything together. But I mean, in a way, kind of like Greg is saying, I feel like the thing that's actually really delightful about the VHS movies, and I think VHS 94 as well, is that they're really great about just empowering each individual filmmaker and kind of leaving them to their own devices creatively. And it's just like, okay, like you do your thing. So I think, you know, there is like an overall sense of like, world, because we're like in 1994, we're like into these VHS tapes, but at the same time, each segment is really, really unique and just like an expression of the voice of that individual filmmaker.
Now, Tananarive and Steven, for horror noir, will that be an anthology where it's kind of like the CREEPSHOW series where every episode is a different story, or will it be more like the slasher series where it's a full season? Is it different?
Every story stands on its own.
Yeah.
However, I think that the success of an anthology series, if let's say you have a movie that has several different segments, that movie has to have a unity. to it, so that when the audience leaves the theater, they have a particular emotion. So you're going to choreograph the order in which you do things so that you are giving them this feeling. Now you're giving them this. Where a show where you're doing something different every week, I think that as long as there is a similarity of tone, Night Gallery, Outer Limits, Twilight Zone, there was a thematic core. Twilight Zone would do things that are basically moral fables. Outer Limits would do science fiction. Other shows would do horror or psychological horror. So there's a unity there too.
And Horror Noir is a hybrid. It's both a series and it will be streamed as like a unit. And I think that the people in charge have really worked hard to curate this from adaptations that will be in conversation with each other, even though even just the two stories we're writing are very, very different. And I imagine all of them are very different, but it will fit that sensibility of trying to like fill up that gap of the missing Black horror we talked about in the documentary Horror Noir.
And that's the thing, is like, this is a chance for those stories. It's funny, like all the stories have kind of been told, but they've only been told from one color, basically. Like, where is the Black Friday the 13th? Where is the Black Halloween? Things like that.
Yeah, Horror Noir was really, and I'm so pleased that horror audiences understood the spirit in which it was expressed, because we all love horror. I've loved horror my whole life. I got my love of horror from my mom, right? But so often, in order to enjoy those films, we had to run into these so tiresome tropes, of like the marginalized Black character who might have also been the comic relief is also, surprise, surprise, the first person to die. Or the old woman who's a spiritual guide and that's her only role, right, in the story. And they're just these tropes.
And then she dies protecting the white people.
Right.
Always.
They must.
Ruby D died so many times so white people could live.
And it's
Paul Winfield. He's the one who just died, in Damnation Alley and Wrath of Khan and
Damnation Alley. Oh my God.
Terminator. On and on and on. It really did get to the point where kids in my neighborhood would know I'd go see one of those movies and they'd say, how'd they kill the brother this time?
So yeah, we love these movies, but so often excluded or used in tropey ways. And I don't want to, pile on, because
But one of the difficulties.
There are things I love about Kubrick's The Shining, but what happened to Scatman Crothers when he walked through the door, when that was such a departure from Stephen King's novel, that's not how he wrote it. That was a character who was supposed to survive the story. That's what we're talking about. It's just like sort of visual fodder to create a jump scare in service to making us more worried about the white characters.
One of the things that is a difficulty is that, if you were to be honest about it, a lot of the horrors that differentiate Black and white viewers have to do with race relations. Okay. So asking a white studio to make a movie wherein Black people are being threatened by white people, or in metaphors for that, is tricky. It requires a very special hand. How do you do this? Jordan Peele figured it out with Get Out. He figured out how to do it without trying to beat up the white audience. If the money is coming from there, you have to serve that audience. So it's a little bit like pogo sticking through a minefield. How close can I get to the thing that I'm really feeling? Right. But at the same time, not be beating up the very people I need to say yes. It's not everybody can walk that line. If you can, I think that right now there's an amazing growth of opportunity if you can walk that line.
It's funny. It's what I said. The movie Predator. Remember the original? Yeah. That was a bit different, wasn't it?
Oh, I loved Predator. Yeah. Predator was one I had no problem.
I think it was a bit ahead of its time in many ways. If you think about that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean what's it?
Carl Weathers and
Carl Weathers.
Yeah, Carl Weathers was the last of them to die. Spoiler, right? The death of the Black characters in Predator had nothing to do with race. It had everything to do with character and this situation. Arnold was the star. You're going to kill off these other people. They didn't die protecting Arnold. They died trying to survive. Or in one case,
Kodo in Alien.
Yes, I had no problem with the way that went either. They even implied that Yaphet Kotto and the lady he kind of died protecting had a relationship. There was a couple little hints that they might have been sexual. Yeah. So that's natural, normal, and it's okay. I love Alien. I love what they did there. Yeah. They did something unique and genre creation.
Adam, your
Yes.
slasher is story, but
Yes,
each
it is.
installment is different. Talk to me about Flesh and Blood. So
Flesh and
excited
Blood.
about this.
This season really follows a wealthy family, and they go back to this secluded island in their mansion, kind of like this family reunion. And they have this very strange thing. I guess they do these competitions to win a prize, and they resurrect this competition. I can't tell you too much. That's what's so frustrating, because if I give away too many things, you got to see the series to see how it starts. But they start these competitions, and it's the grand prize, and everybody wants it. The greed is palpable. But while they do these competitions, there's a killer on the loose, killing them off one by one, and they suspect that that killer's a member of the family. So there's this paranoia that is kind of enveloped through the whole process. So there's a bunch of layers going on this season that's very exciting.
Okay, well, we have a look at that, but
We
first,
do?
We do. But before we go to that one, we're going to talk about CREEPSHOW first, because we got that queued up. The format of CREEPSHOW is episodic. Every episode is a different, 2 stories. How difficult is that to squeeze 2 stories into one episode?
Oh, it's insanely difficult, because I was shooting for the moon. We have 7 days to shoot an episode, which means that we have 3.5 days per story. So every 3.5 days, we're turning over cast and sets, and we would have, directors would come in and they would do a block of 2. We had Chloe for a minute, and then she got snatched away because her short film is so brilliant and she's amazing. So I'll keep my fingers crossed for the future with us. But it's literally the hardest thing in the world to do, because you have to cast, you have to build the sets, everything that you have to do, and you have 3.5 days to do it. And we have a very small budget, and it's kind of interesting because I've spent my career doing a lot for a little. Every film that I've ever done the effects for, and some of them have been huge movies and some of them have been little movies, but it's probably the hardest thing. I mean, the one thing I'll say is my writers have done such an amazing job. I mean, I love working with the writers that I've worked with. They pitched me some great material, and I got to develop some really good stories. So by the time we got to production, the stories were so well fleshed out. Chloe gave me some great notes on a script that I had written that I wanted her to direct. So it was really, but the fun thing about it is too, after 7 days, you're on to a whole new journey.
Right.
I ended up directing 4 segments in the last couple months, and I really loved every second of it. And a lot of them were, I did one called Shapeshifters Anonymous, which was like a comedy.
It was the great holiday special.
I had so much fun because, on Walking Dead, not a lot of comedy involved. Someone's going to die, they're going to get bit by a zombie, you got to shoot him in the head. So I had a really good time with Adam Pally, and
well, he's one of the best. Yeah.
I would giggle so much during and in between takes that I kind of was like, I think I might want to do a comedy one day. But the one thing that I realized about the whole show was the stories that resonated with me were very personal. Like I had, like Model Kid was about a little kid in the 70s. And by the way, most of the anthology pieces that we like playing around with, they all end up being period pieces, like with VHS 94. And like, there's something unique about anthology that allows us to sort of go back in time and experience stories in a different time period. But I realized that the episodes that really resonated with me were things that I had like a personal connection with. And whether it has a connection to Romero, I directed one that Rob Schraub wrote called Public Television of the Dead, and it was an Evil Dead ripoff. So everything that I did, I realized that the most fun I had was when it was stories that somehow either I related to or I had some history with it. And we ended up shooting season 2, and halfway through season 2, AMC said, well, you guys are doing great, and we should just keep going. They were like, well, when do you have to be back on Walking Dead? I said February 4th. They're like, great. Okay, so if you wrap February 2nd on CREEPSHOW, you can go right back to Walking Dead.
Oh boy.
So we shot literally till February 2nd.
So you went straight from 2 to 3.
We went right from season 2 to season 3. We had already developed the stories. So we went right in and we shot 2 seasons back to back. And
where did you find the time to create the monsters and the effects then too?
Well, the good news was we had started the majority of the creatures pre-pandemic shutdown. So most of the creatures for season 2 were well underway, and we kind of shifted a few stories into season 3. And it was a little tight and it was a little rough, but that's one advantage of owning a makeup effects studio and being the showrunner. I mean, that worked on Walking Dead amazingly well, as I would be able to develop these zombie gags well ahead of the 6 days that you usually get to prep an anthology episode.
You ended the season with an actual full-length episode, the Night of the Living Late Show, or the Night of the Living Late Show with Justin Long.
Yeah.
And that was the full episode. It was a longer format. Why kind of break the cycle?
Well, I loved, the episode. The story was so great, and it was, again, very personal to me. This guy invents this machine, and you can go into any movie that you ever wanted to go into. So he goes into Horror Express, not because it had a cool monster or because Christopher Lee and Telly Savalas and Peter Cushing were in it, but because there was a girl in it that when he was an adolescent, he had a crush on her. So he goes into the movie, and there's a whole scene where Justin's like, you can go into Godfather, you can go into Jaws, you can go into any movie you want. I mean, at K&B, we would sit around and we would play that game while we were sculpting, we were working on Army of Darkness. And like, if you could go back in time and work on any movie or be in any movie, and people would say, oh, I would work on Jaws, I would work on Creature from the Black Lagoon, I would work on King Kong. So it tells you a lot about who those people are. So that was kind of, interestingly enough, a game that we used to play. So when I shot the episode, Darcy, Carden, and Justin did such a good job. My first cut came in at about 28 minutes, and we needed 44 minutes for the episode. So I kind of thought, I don't know how I'm going to cut it down, and I don't want to cut it down and shoot another episode. So we added a little more footage from Horror Express, and then I did my giant nerd tribute to Romero with the animated video game. But the only reason that we broke tradition was because I thought the story was so good and so strong, and the characters were so great that I didn't want to cut it. I didn't want to trim it. And Dana Gould wrote the script. So it was a choice. It was a choice that we made because I thought that it played better as a slightly, the episode, the version we aired probably could have trimmed a minute or two, but then, you have runtime on AMC and all that kind of stuff. So it's a little tricky, but I had such a blast. And Hannah Fierman was in that episode, and she's in another episode in season 3. But look, if you haven't seen it on Shudder or AMC Plus, it'll air on AMC on the network September 6th. You'll get a chance to see season 2 of CREEPSHOW. Plug.
So we have a clip from season 3.
Yes.
It's kind of a surprising clip, actually. Can you tell us what we're about to look at?
Well, it's called Familiar. It was written by Josh Mallerman, who wrote Bird Box, and he wrote one of our breakout segments from season 1, which was House of the Head. And, one of the most fun things about collaborating with Josh is he's so open. And so when I read the short story and we started pitching ideas, and we came up with this really crazy, fun ending. But it's a really unique story. Joe Lynch directed it, and it's fun.
And who's your star?
King Bach is our star, and Hannah Fierman is our star. It's just, kind of the perfect CREEPSHOW story.
All right, well, let's go to that clip. Nice.
Oh, wait, don't look.
So do you keep these things all around?
Oh, you have no idea.
Right. So how important are monsters for you for your storytelling?
Well, they're fun to make, of course. And I think CREEPSHOW gives, you know, my crew at K&B have a blast working on the show because there really is no limitation to what we do. Every episode has a different creature or a different character. You know, we may have gone a little overboard. I think the right snuff, we built like this 12-foot tall alien puppet. And then we shot it on green screen, and I was like, shit, it could have been like that big. I didn't think of it. I was just too excited to make a big monster. But look, you know, I mean, there's some of the CREEPSHOW stories are more psychological. There's probably a monster. I think I took the Outer Limits approach, not the Twilight Zone approach, because the Outer Limits, the monsters were called the Bear. And in every Outer Limits episode, there was a monster. So I do think that there is an expectation because of who I am, that there are monsters in the show. But you know, we're you know, most of it, 90% of it is practical, which is great for the directors who walk on set and they're like, wait, I can actually shoot a creature as opposed to, you know, a green ball that everybody has to react to. And then, but you know, I mean, the creatures are a big part of any sort of anthology, of course.
Yeah. Oh, Chloe, I think your segment of VHS 94 has a creature, correct?
It does. Yes, it has a creature in it. I don't know how much I should give away, but yes, when they go into the storm drain, they encounter a creature, and I think it was my first time actually working with a creature, and it was incredible. It was amazing.
It's from what you said off camera. It almost sounds like it's rooted in like an urban legend concept that I've seen on like creepypasta kind of stuff.
Very much so. Yes,
Okay.
very much so. It was actually loosely inspired by a real news story in which people were convinced that they had been seeing a leprechaun.
Oh my God, is this the thing with the drawing?
Yes, it is.
I love that one.
I mean,
So did you have a history with the VHS franchise?
no, not so much. I mean, I got hired on it years ago when they started talking about it. David Bruckner, who is, I'm sure you know, an incredible filmmaker who did The Ritual and The Night House, was sort of at the helm of the project. And for a while, you know, as movies do, it sort of like went through various different stages. But then when it finally happened, you know, we have the incredible Simon Barrett back directing, Timo Tjahjanto is back directing, and they have a group of new filmmakers, myself, Jennifer Reeder, and Ryan Prowse. So I think it's a really good combination of like amazing veteran filmmakers of the VHS series in particular, and some people who they've brought in to sort of like give their chance at coming into this.
Did you like kind of peek your head into any of the other productions to see like what their story was?
Oh man, I wish I could have. I was the first one up, actually. I was the first one to shoot, and I think Simon shot after me, but unfortunately I had to go straight from Canada to Romania to do my feature. So I wasn't on set for production,
Right.
but I was, you know, I'd read people's scripts and they were all incredible, so.
And Greg mentioned your short film, Slut.
Yes.
It got a lot of recognition and got people talking. How was that? How did that kind of set you up for this?
Oh, I mean, I think, you know, yes, Slut did the festival rounds, and, you know, I was very lucky. Some incredible people saw that and decided based off of that to give me a chance, like coming into the VHS series. And Greg, yes, incredible people, legends, absolute legends like Greg Nicotero somehow saw my silly little movie. And so, yeah, I've been very lucky.
Love it. Love it. Okay. So now, Adam, Flasher, we've got a clip from this because you've already teed it up. You've talked to us about what it's like. We've got a clip that is...
I know.
Yeah,
I know. It's not, I know. It's one of those shows that if you give too much away at all, it's one of those, like, almost like it's a whodunit, right?
Right.
The most vicious kind.
This is one of those scenes that, like, when it's done in a film or a television show, it is It's one of the most gruesome things.
It's I think the clip is the very opening of the show.
Oh, good
So
Lord.
there's a lot of questions unanswered, but it's a good way to kind of go into that doorway of slasher and say, oh no, this is a lot of propulsion. It's fast, it's intense, it's emotional.
All right, let's run that
David
clip.
Cronenberg's in it.
Let's do that clip. Okay, all right. So, that's the opening of the season.
Yeah.
Also, visually, it looks a lot more polished, or just a little glossier than the previous seasons of slasher. And you had worked on the last season. What kind of what did you take from that season, or what are you kind of trying to change here?
Well, more than just the aesthetic, Aaron Martin created the show, and Ian Carpenter's the showrunner. And when they did the kind of the pilot episode, the new idea for this season, they really out of left field. Aaron said, "I'm really inspired by Douglas Sirk. Oh. Why don't we bring Douglas Sirk into this world visually?" And the new DP that I was working with, we got so excited because, we had less toys to play with camera and everything because there's, we didn't have the budget we had before kind of thing. So we said, well, this is good. It's kind of restricting, but it makes us more imaginative. So now we can use the dolly a lot, which Douglas Sirk did. So aesthetically that happened as well with the lighting we used and everything, the composition of the shots. It's much more beautiful than it's ever been. And that's the kind of thing we wanted to do with this slash. That's why I think it's the best season. It's so unique because we really wanted to have every frame's a painting, really go for it. Really go for going, wow, that's gorgeous, to something absolutely horrific right beside it. So it keeps you, so we really went for that.
And the show has always been, the seasons have always been very diverse. The cast has been diverse, and it's been very all different kinds of cultures represented. Because this focuses on a family, are you still able to tell more stories of more culture?
There is that element in the show of the bit of the upstairs downstairs dynamic that happens with these wealthy families. Mm-hmm. So you see how, but not everything's as it seems. That's what's so great about this season, is that there's some people. There's more they face in the episode more than just the physical challenges, and because Aaron Martin writes his characters so emotionally, and even from season one, that was always his MO of these are real, fleshed out, deep characters that you're going to care about.
Right, and they carry the trauma of what they've experienced already in the season. I've always noticed that. It's not like somebody gets killed and they that happened in episode 3, and we're not going to discuss that.
But they do in this one a little more, but it's really, this one is about really wealth.
Yeah.
And what it does to people and how far it takes people to chase a carrot that's not even there kind of thing. It's really, anyway, I really, my hat's off to Ian and Aaron for creating it, because I've never seen anything like it.
Why do you think horror works so well in anthologies?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, because I think more than any other genre, because it's like you said before with the campfire thing, it's you finish a good horror story. It's always tell me another one. Tell me another one. I want to go on another ride. I want to go on another ride. Because there's a safety, I think, and maybe Greg, you can speak to this. There's a safety of the taboos and things that we could, have a mirror to ourselves and take it so far to have not be afraid to look at it because it's under the guise of horror. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Well, look, I mean, horror has always had that unique opportunity to approach relevant issues and actually get those issues across without people feeling like they're being preached to. I think it's absolutely 100% the reason. And look, I mean, so many people that love horror, they might watch the news or they might watch something else and they'll turn it on. I don't want to be preached to. I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear that. But then they'll get the same message in a horror movie. But because it's delivered in that world, in that context, they might be more susceptible to hearing it or recognizing it, And I think that's, I mean, so much has been said about, George Romero's casting in Night of the Living Dead and all of his movies. And, George used to say, oh, it wasn't really intentional. I wasn't trying to make a statement. But I think he did without even realizing that he made a statement, because he used to say, well, Dwayne Jones was just the best actor. I hired the guy who was the
Wonderful.
best guy. But you look at all of his movies and you look at his lead and you look at his female lead and you know that he was making a statement. And I think people don't watch horror movies looking for a statement. They watch horror movies to be scared. So it's kind of smart to kind of get those, when applicable, to get those comments in there. Because
that dovetails perfectly with what Stephen and Tananarive are doing with Horror Noir, both as the documentary from 2019 and what the show can now be. So let's talk about this. The legacy of Black genre filmmaking is, it's wild. I mean, and the crazy thing is, like, all of that stuff that happened in the 60s and 70s, all the white filmmakers stole it for the 80s and 90s.
Well, I'm actually glad that Greg brought up Night of the Living Dead, which is something that we talk about in the documentary Horror Noir, and how important it was to have Dwayne Jones in that role, and how in 1968 it was such a bold statement. And I really do think that whole film is coming out of all the social upheaval of the late 60s. But it was a rare example of a non-Black filmmaker who, whether it was intentional or not in that casting, really seemed to get it. And in Horror Noir, we're talking about, a lot of the times when people didn't get it.
Yeah, I kind of suspect that if you were going to try to remake Night of the Living Dead and have some of the same impact, you'd have to take a look at what it was as a cultural moment, that the country was beginning to ask questions about whether or not Black people were fully American. Are we deserving of full rights? So I suspect that the Dwayne Jones character would be trans. If you were to do Night of the Living Dead today.
People that are getting their marginalization, right?
That's
so
right.
Let's look at, there's a clip that we have from the documentary that also speaks to that and also sets up the next thing I want to ask you about. So let's run the clip from Horror Noir. All right. Okay, so that was 2019. You're looking at the future, like where the changes are coming. We just gotten Us. Then we have, Get Out, Them on Amazon, like all these things. And you're talking about Night of the Living Dead coming out of all that social upheaval. What do you think we're going to see coming out of Black Lives Matters and the last year that we just had?
Wow, there's a lot. There's a lot to that. I think Black horror as a subgenre is finding itself, right? So as Black horror creators, we have to learn how to walk that line between creating creating scares and creating trauma, right? So it's not the thing itself, right? So it's not the thing itself. Like you said, what about a Black Friday the 13th? I was just using this as an example. A Black Friday the 13th with a white killer or a white racist killer would not be fun to watch for a Black audience, right? So we can't actually just recreate what's been done before and add Black faces. It has to come from a sensibility of how do you use allegory to express
and there are going to be a lot of people who are engaged, and the ones who succeed are going to lead the way. And they're going to do new things. The question of what is it that we go to a horror film for is the expression of a scream. You create the tension and you release it with a scream. It's like in a comedy, you create tension and you release it with a laugh. So what is the tension that is being released there? I can talk about myself. I can talk about what I have been through in that sense. I remember being on a panel once and people, were questioning me about slasher movies, and they were being just a little bit rude. About it. Well, why do you like that stuff? And I said, well, the thing I enjoy most is watching white teenagers die. And the audience broke up, and they were just laughing and laughing. They were releasing their tension. And I leaned over and I said, the funny thing is, you guys think I'm kidding. Yeah. And then they laughed and laughed and laughed, uncomfortably, of course, because we understand that if we assume equality, then it is clear that something has happened that has prevented that in terms of some core demographic, information. So releasing that spring, there is a real spring there. There's a lot of tension there that a good filmmaker, a good artist who can take their own pain and filter it through their own creative kidneys, as it were, so that they give something to the audience that intoxicates them, but doesn't club them over the head. Every artist is going to do something different. I would be very careful about wondering what it's going to be. I know what it is that I want to do. Tananarive knows what it is that she's going to do.
And that's what's great about an anthology series, like we're all talking about with Horror Noir, is because you have different creators showing you different visions of what Black horror is. It's not all social horror. It's
Right. That's what I was worried about. Like, that were we going to just see a flood of social horror? Because like,
no, you can't do that. You know, because and some of them are going to be like Caribbean. Some of them are going to be African. In other words, the cultures that have their own mythology,
right,
and their own stories in that sense. It can't just be white, black defined in opposition to. You can't do that. It has to be a matter of this is our humanity. I don't want to write that. I have no interest in writing that.
Well, I have some interest in writing.
Yes, you do.
Here's the thing for you guys, because now you also get a chance in working in an anthology format. You get to create so many jobs for Black writers.
That's what I'm so excited about. Like, we're working on a lot of stuff. I feel so blessed to have met this moment in Hollywood. I'm on my fourth career, but there's so many people involved in this. Victor Laval, is one of the writers, a great Black horror author who's adapting his own work, and Chernold Edwards is adapting a story.
Are you adapting any of yours?
We are adapting.
She adapted.
We're adapting one of my stories and one we wrote jointly.
Yeah, nice. And here's the really fun thing about the one we did jointly is that we developed it in real time with a group of students we were writing. Where they pitched us a couple of story areas, and right there live on this virtual thing, we chose a couple of them. We developed the story. We wrote it on a Google document that they were linked to, so they could actually see the development of the writing. We documented every step of it, and then we documented how we sold it. Yeah. And now we've sold it again, and we're going to be able to document the creation of it on as a television episode. So it's beautiful, because what we want to do is demystify the process of getting into Hollywood, of learning how to express yourself. So that of the 1,000 people who try to do that, 10 of them will end up being the voices that we need.
I also just want to finish shouting out the other writers, Ezra C. Daniels and Al Letson, and it's so great to be a part of a collective. That's the most exciting.
And that's the thing, like the anthology allows you to create a collective, which is so cool. I have to wrap you guys because we're live, but I have a fan question first from Brianna. She wants to know from you guys, all of you, why do you think horror on TV is what the world needs now?
If I was to say that, it's that if we can understand that we're all scared by the same things, it's a lot like being able to say that we all laugh at the same things. What we're trying to do is some of the old mythologies about who we are as a culture in America have fallen down. But the thing is, we're still a country. We still have neighbors and friends and lovers, and that to the degree that we can see each other's humanity, it knits us together. So the campfire stories that say there's a bugaboo out in the darkness, there's something that can kill us. You're scared of that too. I'm scared of that. So now all of a sudden we're not looking at each other and seeing our differences. We're starting to understand we're all human beings. And to the degree we can do that, that's what a culture is. It's people standing together, protecting each other's children and standing against the night. So I think it's beautiful.
Nice. And even the long format, like a season of slasher, it's an anthology, yes, but every season's onto itself. So it's one really long movie. So you can really get to know all these characters, the story's fleshed out beautifully. And it's a catharsis for sure. That, like you explained really eloquently there. And then we can all enjoy it together, and family, like this one is like, we all can relate to family. Oh yeah. All of us. Right. We can
all families are scary.
Everybody has that something there that we can all relate to. We understand the complexities of a family dynamic,
Chloe?
I don't think I could say it any better than Stephen did. I think it's just the collective experience of engaging with our fears, I think, is really powerful. I spend an inordinate amount of time just listening to people tell scary stories on YouTube, and I don't know what it is about that that's so compelling, but I think it is just something about mythology and primal fears and sharing in that with other people. So horror on television definitely is a strong gateway into that.
Well, it has a unique, its own unique sort of DNA, because if you really think about the idea of, and I think Stephen sort of hinted at it, sitting around a campfire and telling stories, and the experience of, and that experience is really gone for the most part. As long as stories have been told and people would gather around the hearth and they would pass on history, or they would tell stories, a lot of that, because people don't share. It's not a shared experience as much anymore. So for the opportunity to sort of recreate the idea or the essence of sitting around a campfire and telling spooky stories, and more than just, it's not just one story and you're done. You know, when I was growing up and your friends and you'd be outside at night and, you know, the spooky stuff was, you know, floating around, and then somebody would tell a story and then your friend's like, I got that.
I got that one right.
And then the next thing you know, everybody around, like I think everybody on this panel, we should all get together around a campfire and we should all try to scare each other. And
oh my God, that would be heaven.
It would be so great because
I'll bring the marshmallows. Let's do it. Let's just do it.
I'll bring the chainsaw.
There you go. Bring that head that you showed us.
Well, no, but it's really, I think that's the one thing that anthologies do for us, is it gets us to sort of recreate that primal DNA of sitting around the hearth or sitting on the campfire and sharing these stories and those experiences. And I think that's what everybody on this panel strives to do and relishes in the idea of trying to scare somebody more than the story before or, you know, the story after. And that's the fun part, is sitting in the back, sitting in the back of the theater and watching everybody. You know, I was telling a story yesterday about working on Misery and talking to Rob Reiner after the cast crew screening about the fact that when Kathy Bates raises the sledgehammer, he said you could feel the oxygen in the theater disappear because everybody reacted all at the same time. And, you know, we don't have that experience as much anymore because people don't have that communal experience of going through that emotion. So the next best thing in a lot of instances is horror anthologies, because you get to give them little appetizers and little tidbits of emotion, and let them go on the roller coaster that George Romero used to talk about all the time. George used to say, horror is like a roller coaster, and laughing, you know, Stephen said, laughing and screaming is such a similar emotion. But at the end, when people get off a roller coaster, none of them are screaming anymore. They're all laughing. It's a very unique situation. And I remember George used to talk about that all the time, about that experience. And that's what we do. And the anthologies give us more opportunities to do that. And I think, you know, everybody on this panel, we want those opportunities. We want the chance to make somebody scream or make them cower or make them afraid.
All right. Well, you guys do that wonderfully. I congratulate to all. Thank you to our panelists, Greg, Tananarive, Chloe, and as a reminder, you guys, SHUDDER premieres August 12th. VHS 94 premieres later this year, and look out for the third season of CREEPSHOW and the new anthology Horror Noir, both debuting this fall on SHUDDER. You guys, thank you so much. This was a horror fan's dream come true, so thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, SHUDDER, and thank you, ATX.
Great job, everybody.
Woo!
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye,
guys.
everyone.